The Russian tanker was transmitting its position 140 miles away from where it actually was. That lie was the first thing NATO saw. It was not the most dangerous thing in the water that morning, but it was the thing that told the P-8A crew exactly what they were dealing with before a single hatch had opened. 0342 hours. Mediterranean Sea, 60 nautical miles southwest of Sardinia. The pre-dawn surface was flat and moonless, the kind of darkness that makes a ship's running lights look like they belong to a different world. The P-8A Poseidon, operating out of Naval Air Station Sigonella, had been on its assigned sector patrol for 2 hours and 40 minutes when its sensor suite resolved the Volkov, a 48,000 deadweight-ton Panamax bulk carrier listed in the Aquasis database as transiting in ballast between Tunis and Genoa, current AIS position, placing it well to the southeast near the Tunisian shelf break. The Volkov was not near the Tunisian shelf break. It was here, 11 nautical miles above the Tyrrhenian cable corridor, the submarine fiber optic bundle that carries approximately 40% of internet transit between Europe and North Africa, and through which something in the range of $3 trillion in daily financial settlement data flows in both directions. The AIS position broadcast was a fabrication being transmitted at the correct power level, on the correct frequency, with the correct vessel identification codes, from a separate transponder unit aboard the ship set to generate a ghost position well outside the operational area. Shadow Fleet vessels use this technique routinely to evade sanctions monitoring. The Volkov was using it for a different purpose, to keep the ship's real position out of civilian traffic displays and commercial satellite tracking services long enough to complete what it had come to do. The P-8A's sensor officer marked the real contact, cross-referenced the AIS discrepancy, and transmitted a priority report up the chain. Within 4 minutes, the Mediterranean Theater Network had its first confirmed datum on an active gray zone operation targeting undersea critical infrastructure. The Italian Navy frigate Virginio Fasan and Frem-class multi-mission warship, already conducting a coordinated patrol, received vectoring instructions and began a modified approach toward the Volkov's actual position. The approach geometry was not random. The P-8A's tactical computer had analyzed the Volkov's bridge radar system, an older Furuno marine navigation radar operating on a 9 GHz X-band with a 3-second antenna rotation cycle, and calculated a corridor of approach that placed the Fasan outside the radar's effective detection range for the first 22 nautical miles of the intercept run. The frigate was moving toward the target through the gap in the Russian vessel's own sensor picture, guided by the American aircraft overhead. In the Fasan's Combat Information Center, the Link 16 data stream was painting a shared tactical picture that merged the P-8A's radar and electro-optical data, the Italian Navy's Medusa underwater sensor network, a fixed hydrophone array seated along the major cable corridors of the central Mediterranean, and the frigate's own towed array sonar. The acoustic picture being built from that fusion had a resolution that no single sensor could have generated independently. Every mechanical noise from the Volkov's poorly maintained propulsion plant was being isolated, cataloged, and cross-referenced against shipping database records. The ship's propeller blade rate, its main engine firing order harmonics, the characteristic rattle of a loose stabilizer fin fitting, all of it was being recorded in a profile that would make this specific vessel identifiable anywhere in the Mediterranean for the next 10 years. What the sensor fusion returned about the water immediately below the Volkov was not in the original mission brief. The acoustic waterfall display in the Fasan's sonar compartment showed the Volkov's noise floor, and embedded within it at a slightly different depth registration, a secondary acoustic source that was not the tanker's own machinery. The signal was structured in a way that was immediately recognizable to the sonar operator who had been looking at these patterns for 6 years. It was the specific frequency content of a Los Angeles-class attack submarine traveling at slow speed on natural circulation reactor cooling. The acoustic fingerprint of an American nuclear submarine emanating from directly beneath a Russian-flagged civilian vessel 60 miles southwest of Sardinia. The USS Los Angeles was not operating in this sector. The duty operations officer confirmed it in under 90 seconds. The acoustic signature was artificial, a high-powered sonar transducer towed beneath the Volkov's keel, broadcasting a pre-recorded acoustic library file of American submarine noise, timed and modulated to pass basic automated classification checks. The purpose was to introduce a hesitation event. If NATO's response system identified the contact beneath the Volkov as potentially a friendly submarine, the rules governing engagement authorization would impose a verification delay. That delay was the operational window the Volkov needed. The deception was sophisticated. It failed because the Faison's fusion system was comparing the acoustic signature, not just against class identification parameters, but against the known operational positions of every U.S. Navy submarine in the Mediterranean theater, data that the Link 16 network carried in real time. A Los Angeles-class submarine at this position, at this time, was geometrically impossible given the confirmed locations of all relevant friendly units. The classification system flagged the contact as adversarial emitter within 40 seconds of first detection. At 0408 hours, a second contact emerged from the sensor picture that changed the operation's urgency profile entirely. The Russian intelligence-gathering vessel Yuri Ivanov, a Yuri Ivanov-class signals intelligence ship that the Mediterranean maritime community tracks as a matter of routine, given its persistent presence in areas of undersea infrastructure interest, had been operating approximately 18 nautical miles north of the Volkhov on a slow drift heading. It now activated its electronic warfare systems. What the Yuri Ivanov suite did was not broadband jamming, which NATO's modern systems are substantially hardened against. It was more precise than that. The system was monitoring the Link 16 data transmissions between the P-8A and the Fasan, capturing the encrypted data bursts, introducing a microsecond retransmission delay, and rebroadcasting them with subtle alterations to the embedded positional data. The effect on the Fasan's tactical display was disorienting. The Volkhov's position icon began appearing at 3 separate locations simultaneously, each with a slightly different timestamp, the display logic unable to resolve which return was current and which were delayed echoes of prior transmissions. The USS Kearney, an Arleigh Burke-class flight 2A destroyer operating as the sector's senior surface warfare unit, registered the Link 16 integrity compromise and immediately isolated its own display from the corrupted data stream, reverting to its own organic sensor picture and maintaining an independent tactical track on the Volkhov using its AN/SPY-1D radar. The Kearney's electronic warfare officer activated the AN/SLQ-32 suite and began building a precise emitter profile on the Yuri Ivanov's jamming system, logging every frequency, every pulse timing characteristic, every modulation parameter that the Russian ship was using. The jamming was tactically disruptive. It was also an intelligence goldmine. Every second the Yuri Ivanov transmitted, it was completing NATO's understanding of its own electronic warfare architecture. Below the surface, the acoustic picture had developed a third layer. The Fasan's towed array and the Medusa network nodes beneath the Volkhov's position were now resolving a contact that the Volkhov's false Los Angeles signature had been designed to mask. A Kilo Class 6 36.3 submarine, the so-called black hole boat for its exceptionally low broadband noise level, positioned almost directly beneath the tanker's keel, its propeller rotation synchronized to the tanker's own machinery cadence in a technique that used the louder vessel's noise floor as acoustic camouflage. The synchronization was precise enough that casual analysis would have merged the 2 acoustic sources into a single vessel contact. The analysis was not casual. The processing algorithm being run on the Medusa network data was looking specifically for the bilateral symmetry break that occurs when 2 independent noise sources attempt to synchronize. The microscopic phase relationship differences that emerge between a tanker's engine noise and a diesel-electric submarine mimicking it are not identical to a single vessel's self-generated noise, and the subtle difference between those 2 patterns was enough for the fusion system to separate them into 2 distinct contacts. The Virginia-class attack submarine USS Minnesota, which had been operating under emissions control 40 nautical miles to the west and had received the initial contact report via a brief VLF communication, began its approach. The Minnesota is not primarily described as a stealth platform in the sense that term usually implies the ability to avoid detection. It is better understood as a precision sensor platform that happens to be very difficult to detect. Its large aperture bow array processes acoustic data at a resolution that allows it to build a 3-dimensional mechanical model of a target submarine, identifying individual machinery components, their operational state, their physical location within the hull from passive listening alone at combat ranges. The Minnesota approached the Kilo from below, establishing a geometry in which the 3 vessels, tanker on the surface, Kilo at operational depth, Minnesota below the Kilo, were stacked in a vertical column in approximately 600 meters of water. When the Minnesota's captain assessed that his boat was correctly positioned, he authorized a single active sonar pulse. The pulse was not a standard search ping. It was a concentrated, high-intensity, low-frequency transmission. 240 decibels at the source, focused in a directional beam aimed upward at the Kilo's hull from a distance of less than 150 meters. At that range and that power level, the acoustic energy impacting the Russian submarine's steel hull was not a sound in any ordinary sense. It was a physical impact, a pressure wave that transmitted through the hull into the interior spaces, with enough force to shatter unsecured glassware, knock unsecured items from surfaces, and produce immediate disorientation in personnel exposed to the full transmission. The Kilo's commanding officer understood with complete clarity what had just happened. A U.S. Navy submarine had been directly beneath him, tracking him for an unknown period of time, and had chosen this moment to announce that fact in the most unambiguous physical register available. The torpedo tubes stayed closed. While the underwater confrontation was developing, a third element of the Russian operation was executing independently. From the Yuri Ivanov's moon pool, the internal flooded bay that intelligence ships use to deploy underwater vehicles, a remotely operated vehicle had been descending toward the cable corridor since approximately 0450 hours. The ROV carried a pressurized attachment device designed to clamp onto the cable's outer protective armoring, establishing physical contact sufficient to allow high-sensitivity passive monitoring of the electromagnetic fields generated by the optical signals inside. Not a cut, a tap. A sustained intelligence collection operation that would, if undetected, provide Moscow with continuous access to a portion of the data transiting the cable bundle. The ROV's approach was being tracked by two of the Minnesota's LDU-UV companion vehicles, small autonomous underwater vehicles that the Virginia-class carries in its external payload modules and that had been deployed during the approach phase to extend the boat's sensor reach along the seafloor corridor. When the ROV made contact with the cable's outer sheathing, the LDU-UV sensor data registered the contact and transmitted the position up the chain. The Italian Navy's Comsubin combat swimmers, the Special Operations Diving Unit based at La Spezia, among the most capable underwater special operations forces in NATO, had deployed from a modified shallow water submarine that had been holding a subsurface position 4 nautical miles from the cable corridor since 0430 hours. The briefing they had received before entering the water included a real-time acoustic map of the ROV's position, generated by the Medusa network and updated continuously via an encrypted acoustic communication link to their diving apparatus. They were not navigating by sight or by compass bearing. They were navigating through a 3-dimensional sound picture being painted for them by a distributed sensor network from the surface down. The extraction approach took 22 minutes. The ROV's attachment device had a series of pressure-sensitive release mechanisms designed to sever the cable if the device detected an unauthorized removal attempt, a dead man's trigger intended to ensure that if the tap was discovered, it completed the sabotage mission anyway. The data on the trigger's activation sequence had been derived from a prior capture of a similar Russian device in the Baltic Theater and had been transmitted to the Komsubin team's mission package before deployment. They worked through the disengagement sequence in the order the intelligence assessment specified. The device released cleanly. The cable was intact. At 0557 hours, the Carney moved. The destroyer's approach to the Volkov was not a gradual closing of range. It was a direct, high-speed intercept that placed the 9,200-ton warship across the tanker's bow at a distance of approximately 90 meters, close enough that the displacement wave from the Carney's hull created a rolling surge against the Volkov's side that was felt throughout the smaller vessel. The maneuver was within the parameters of accepted maritime challenge procedures. It was also a demonstration of intent that required no translation. The long-range acoustic device mounted on the Carney's forward deck activated and directed a 150 decibel focused acoustic beam across the Volkov's bridge windows. At that output level, directed at personnel in an enclosed space, the physiological effect is immediate. Tinnitus, nausea, spatial disorientation, and a pain response that makes sustained coordinated activity effectively impossible. The Volkov's crew was not in a position to make complex decisions for approximately 90 seconds following the LRAD activation. The message transmitted on the International Maritime Distress Frequency during those 90 seconds was direct. The vessel had been identified, its actual position was confirmed, its AIS discrepancy was documented, and it was directed to alter course for international waters immediately or prepare to receive a boarding party under International Maritime Law Authority. By 0615 hours, the picture was complete. The Volkov recovered its towed sonar transducer and set a course toward international waters at maximum available speed. The Yuri Ivanov's electronic warfare systems went offline when it became apparent that the Minnesota had not only locked the Kilo, but had transmitted its fire control solution parameters to the Carney via the data link. a demonstration that the ship's destruction was a decision, not a capability question. The Kilo disengaged from its position beneath the Volkov and began a slow egress toward deeper water, the Minnesota maintaining close trail for the first 60 nautical miles of its departure route. The cable was undamaged. The attachment device was in NATO custody. The complete electronic warfare profile of the Yuri Ivanov cyber mirror system, every frequency, every modulation parameter, every timing characteristic, was in the P-8A's data recorder and would be at the exploitation facility in Sigonella before noon. The accounting of this operation, assessed honestly, runs in two directions. Russia invested a Shadow Fleet vessel, a dedicated SIGINT ship, a Kilo-class submarine, an ROV with a classified cable tap device, and the operational security of its Mediterranean undersea infrastructure targeting doctrine. The cable tap failed. The submarine was exposed, held at acoustic gunpoint, and escorted out. The SIGINT ship revealed its most capable electronic warfare system to NATO collection assets. The Shadow Fleet vessel was identified, documented, and publicly traceable through its IMO number regardless of future flag or name changes. NATO spent P-8A flight hours, 1 frigate sortie, 1 destroyer movement, 1 submarine deployment, a team of combat swimmers, and electricity. It received a complete technical profile of a Russian cable tap device, the full electronic order of battle for a Yuri Ivanov-class SIGINT platform, confirmation of the acoustic masking technique used by 6 36.3 class submarines operating in conjunction with surface cover, and an updated acoustic library entry for the specific Kilo unit involved. The cable is intact. Europe's digital traffic ran uninterrupted. The financial systems that route through that corridor registered nothing anomalous that morning. The lesson this operation points toward is not primarily about the individual systems involved, the LRAD, the active sonar pulse, the Komsubin extraction. Those are the instruments. The lesson is about the architecture that coordinated them. 4 national sensor networks feeding a single shared tactical picture, updated in real time, available to every platform in the operation simultaneously. The Russian operation was constructed to exploit gaps, the gap between what a P-8A could see and what a frigate could see, the gap between surface radar coverage and subsurface acoustic awareness, the gap between the cable's physical location and NATO's ability to monitor it in real time. In every case, the gap the operation was designed to exploit had already been closed by the distributed sensor fusion architecture. There was no seam to find. Here's the question this engagement makes unavoidable: the cyber mirror attack on the Link 16 network. The technique of capturing and retransmitting data link traffic with embedded false positional data represents a genuine vulnerability that required the Carney to isolate its display and revert to organic sensors. If a more capable version of that technique were able to corrupt the shared tactical picture simultaneously across all nodes in the network rather than introducing detectable inconsistencies between them, the entire distributed response architecture depends on. How does NATO build resilience against a Link 16 integrity attack that is sophisticated enough to pass the consistency checks that expose this one? Leave your answer below.